Very good. I'd like to introduce you all to Lisa Shipek. She's Executive Director for the Watershed Management Group. I asked her to give a presentation called Designing an Urban Forest, Food Forest from the Top to the Bottom in the Sonoran Desert. So Watershed Management Group, I was like, pull it all together. She's like, I don't know if, she rose to the occasion. And I hope everybody's joining us tomorrow because we're going to spend all afternoon at Watershed Management Group. We got some neat activities planned. So Lisa, all yours.
Thank you, Christopher. Yes, please, I hope you can join us. Is this on still? Yes, okay. I hope you can join us tomorrow at our Living Lab and Learning Center, where this will all make more sense because you can see it in person. But I'm going to run through a number of ideas today to help spark hopefully some creative learning here in the room, just on some of my own experience with this work over the last 15 or so years. I am one of the co-founders of Watershed Management Group. We are a local Tucson nonprofit organization, and a lot of our work is based here as well as in the Borderlands and up in the Phoenix area. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land and water that makes up the Sonoran Desert and the Hohokam and Sabai Prairie people who this is their ancestral lands, and the Tohono O'odham and the Pascoyaki people who continue to steward the lands today. And what an important piece we've heard from all of the previous speakers about really tuning in to your local context and learning from the plants and the animals and the people who have been here for time immemorial. One of the concepts that's fundamental to food forests here that you'll be hopefully seeing tomorrow, and I'll talk about in my presentation, is this idea of hydrolocal. And we've heard all sorts of variations of this with speakers today. So I just want to dive into that a little bit more, particularly important in the arid West here in the Sonoran Desert, that we value and steward our local renewable water resources instead of depleting distant aquifers. And currently, the city of Tucson is importing most of its water from the Colorado River. And we would like to see that our local agriculture is looking not as much at those faraway distant watersheds, but looking at what we have here locally and really stewarding those local water resources. So that can be done at home through a variety of practices, from rainwater harvesting, reusing gray water, stewarding our rivers, really thinking about how we're using the water that comes into our house, having more water efficient fixtures, tapping into our stormwater as a water source as well. So a few basic elements that I'd like to cover today about Sonoran Food Forest, so grounded here in the Sonoran Desert. I would like to talk a little bit about plants, water, and soil. So the theme for plants is, in the context of building a food forest, a Sonoran food forest, is that you can eat local with native edible plants. And that's really the baseline of the plant palette for the food forest. For water, we can steward our watershed with a hydrolocal water budget. So looking to supply the majority, if not all, of the water needs from local renewable sources instead of imported water. And then for soil, that we're using on-site resources, turning what can be typically waste into resources to provide those nutrients and cycle nutrients on site, with things like humanure, urine, and mulching with on-site resources. So the food forest that I'm going to be referring to is just a very tiny urban food forest at our Living Lab in Midtown Tucson. It's about a half an acre property, a typical kind of urban soils in a degraded state mostly. There was a few native plants on the property. We started developing this food forest in 2014, so 10 years ago now. And if you come tomorrow, you'll get to see what it looks like 10 years later. The overstory plants are made up of native edible trees, so our velvet mesquite, our desert ironwood, Blue Palo Verde or Foothills Palo Verde, those all have native edible parts to them that we can take advantage of. And our mid-story in this food forest are fruit trees, some of the missionary stock, pomegranates and fig trees, as well as citrus, which grow really well here in the desert. And then the understory, again, going back to our native plants, prickly pear, chiltepin, a native chile, oregano, wolfberry. There's so many plants we could go into. I'm just giving you a few examples of what we have on our site. So we've heard about some of these plants already today, so I won't spend too much time on these, but we have an amazing diversity of native edible trees, which also create wonderful shade here in the desert, which all can be grown with rainwater. Our velvet mesquite has edible pods, and we can harvest those mostly in the summertime. Our foothills Palo Verde also edible pods, which are harvested coming up here late spring, early summer. And same with the desert ironwood. One of the great shrubs that can be used in a food forest here in the Sonoran Desert is the wolfberry, and it has these little edible berries. And I meant to ask, I'm going to back up actually, because I'm curious today. How many people have eaten from a velvet mesquite? Raise your hand. Okay, like a majority of the room. Okay. How many people have had a foothills Palo Verde bean? Okay, it's a decent number. So the season's coming up. So if you live here, this is your assignment. What about desert ironwood? How many people have eaten those? Okay, wow. Okay, so that's another challenge if you live here. Again, well, it's a small window of time, and I'm going to be looking for that small window of time myself to harvest some of these. You have to find trees that are flowering and have those seed pods on them. But that season's coming up, so keep an eye out for the ironwoods. What about wolfberry? Raise your hand if you've eaten off. Okay, amazing. Hackberry. Okay. And prickly pear. Okay, we have a very well-versed crowd here in native edibles, so that's very exciting. Okay, devil's claw. How many people have eaten devil's claw? Okay, I just see a few hands here, so I'm going to add this to your list. Again, I think this has a pretty wide range, not just in the Sonoran Desert. I could be wrong on that. These come up with the monsoon rains. So I didn't start eating these until a few years ago. I think it was 2021. We had amazing summer rains, and these came up all over my yard. I didn't even know they were in my yard, but with all that rain, they came up. And so you can see the little green fruits there. They're kind of like okra, but they're more bitter. And you definitely want to find them when they're young and tender, and you can cook them, throw them in stir fry. You can pickle them. That's what I recommend. It takes the bitterness away. So definitely that's also something you can grow in your garden. If you have the seeds and a little bit of water, they'll produce prolifically. So definitely recommend that one. Either one. Yeah. Purslane, how many people have had this plant? Okay, decent amount. And this also is plant often comes up with the summer monsoons. You can also grow it in your gardens. I think Native Seed Search sells these seeds. Great source for your salads. Okay, so then moving on to water. So thinking about the local watershed context, we look to use, if we can, only local renewable supplies. So that means we're using rainwater, both passively through earthworks that are capturing rainwater when it falls, basins and berms and swales, and also capturing water off our roof, storing it in tanks, and using that for irrigation in the summer months, specifically for the fruit trees. Stormwater off the street, we are also utilizing in this food forest area. That adds that extra bit of rain, just kind of amplifies the amount of area that you can collect from. Gray water, we have multiple sources coming into our food forest. We're using laundry machine water. We're also using kitchen sink water. and then also AC condensate. So think about all the potential sources of water. What's fun about an urban context and smaller sites is that you have a lot of these sources of water concentrated in a small space, so you can have a pretty lush food forest. And then thinking about what are your plant's water demands. Again, tomorrow we'll spend a little bit more time workshopping this for your own context. But thinking about when you're planting a food forest, what can you do that's native that would thrive on the local rainfall? And then if you are doing plants that aren't native, what are the additional water demands that those plants need, and really understanding that. And when you think about that in the context of the Sonoran Desert, our hot, dry season is late spring, summer, before the monsoons come. And so really what you're doing is trying to figure out the additional water that you need March or April through June for those fruit trees. So that would really need to be done with gray water and or a stored rainwater source. As an example, a mesquite tree, water demand in a year is about 5,000 gallons, a citrus tree, 4,000 to 8,000 gallons, which it doesn't look too different. However, the citrus does demand a lot more water in that hot, dry season. And so you have to really think about how you're going to get at that extra water during that time. The mesquite, on the other hand, the native plant is much more resilient to the natural water cycle that happens during the year here. As a little case study, the Living Lab, again, we'll be visiting tomorrow. We have set a goal of meeting all our water needs with local renewable water supply. And we've gotten pretty close. We just tallied all the data in the last couple months from the last 8 years. We have been using rainwater for everything from drinking, hand washing, basically everything. Everything you would possibly need water for on site for growing food, as well as tapping into gray water and stormwater. And through doing this, our goal was not to have to use the city water supply, which, as I mentioned earlier, is primarily from the Colorado River. So based on the last 8 years, on average each year, about 76% of our water supply has come from these sources. So we're pretty excited about that number, especially considering that we've had a bunch of really dry years in the last 8 years. And so we've been able to prove that it's possible for these water sources to be our primary water supply for all these water needs. And then as we're adapting and learning from this, we've actually, in the last year, added more storage capacity and hope to see that number go up a lot closer to 90%, maybe 100% of our water supply. So we've only have 10,000 gallons of storage capacity at our facility. However, we have a lot of storage capacity in the soil because our whole landscape has those passive earthworks. So quite a bit of water is going right into the soil, being stored there. We've guttered about 4,000 square feet of roof, and we've gotten on average between 4 and 15 inches of rain for each of those years. The last 8 years, 4 inches was that crazy dry year in 2020. And you can see this graph here that shows the variability of the rain. And this is rain that fell on site. So we have a rain collection on site that we're able to monitor that as well. So this is really, I think, good news for, again, those folks doing this on a small urban scale, that this water supply can be a primary water supply for all our water needs, including growing a food forest. Okay, moving on to soil and nutrients. We are really wanting to utilize all on-site resources for our nutrients, and that is what we've done. We have put in composting toilets and removed all our flush toilets on site. We did that in the first year, and that not only is helping provide compost and nutrients, but also is helping us meet our water budget, because flushing toilets is the #1 use of water. So we are applying human manure, which compost coming out of the composting toilet system 1 to 2 times a year to the food forest. We have urine diversion set up in several places that are going out to the food forest, and that's happening on a daily basis. It goes right out into the soil. And then on-site mulching is happening anytime we're doing weeding or tree trimming. And so those nutrients are being cycled right on site. This is an interesting fun fact if you're thinking about how much nutrients can you get out of these sources of human manure or urine. Each person produces about 13 gallons of feces per year, and that could be meeting the needs of 13% of a person's grain production. Does that seem like a lot or a little? Okay. Statistics are always fun. They're like, okay. So for diverted urine, 2 liters of urine per day per person, and that could fertilize 70% of a person's grain production. That's a lot higher. So cool urine, right? And actually, if you were going to dabble in composting toilets or urine diversion could be the low hanging fruit to do. That's a lot easier and maybe a higher bang for your buck. This picture is of what we call a uragator, which is a urine only it's not a composting toilet, a urine only toilet that's located right in our food forest. We wanted to put it right where the urine is needed for fertilizer. And so that gets used every day by staff and visitors. And so quite a bit of nutrients is going out to that food forest. It does actually. See the sit down one? There's a sit down one that you lift the toilet seat and it has a funnel. And so there's a stand up one, which you can see on the side, and then a sit down one. So it is designed for women specifically. And that also goes out to the garden. No, this is at the living lab. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Urine only. Yeah. Here's an example of a site-built, low-cost composting toilet that our organization puts these together and sells them for people interested. And then you can use this human manure on your own garden at home. It's about 4 months to rotate between the barrels and have finished compost. And that's what it looks like. 800, I'm not sure. It's definitely about half the cost of the commercial varieties. Yeah. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. We call it irrigation or our irrigators. This is, again, set up right in the food forest. And you can create a much simpler version of this, but essentially you're just diverting the urine into a chamber underground, so it's not outletted above grade. And there's an example of a photo of what like a larger half dome chamber might look like. And we use that for the composting toilet where, is that 10 minutes? Okay, thank you. Where we're having visitors use every day, so we needed a much higher capacity, but you could use a 5-gallon bucket if it's just for your own home and use that as the little chamber that goes underground to divert the urine into. Definitely want to flush it with rainwater if you have rainwater, so you're not having the salt build up in the soil. So after you go number 1, then you're just going to flush it with rainwater, and that'll keep it moving through the soil. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of our community engagement strategies. We just started this year a native edible tree workshop series. We've been doing this in a whole variety of forms through hands-on workshops for the last decade. We're putting a little more emphasis on it this year thanks to some grant funding. And that includes native edible workshops, which are about 2 hours. We invite people to come look at different native edible plants and then taste them, of course. We do rain garden workshops pretty frequently with neighborhoods, community groups, schools, and now we're starting to add more of an emphasis that the plant palette we're giving out with those rain garden workshops are native edible plants, and that we're doing specific education about native edible plants as well. So starting later this year, we'll have a whole series of workshops where we do rain garden workshops, and the kits that people take home are all native edible plants. And Charles, sitting up there in the front row, is providing the plants for those kits. So I'm very excited to work with Charles on that. We are also starting to play around with some different formats of this work, some neighborhood asset mapping. If you live in the Tucson area and want to do this with your neighborhood, we'd be happy to collaborate and experiment with this set of a workshop. And the idea is that we come together, gather neighbors with big piece of paper and start just blocking out like where people currently might be either harvesting already or know of native edibles, and just kind of building that knowledge together as a neighborhood and figuring out where harvest could take place in the future. And then we're also going to be doing some hands-on harvest workshops in various neighborhoods as well when the season arrives. So those might end up being a little bit like pop-up events, because the season, we know generally when the season's going to happen, but we've seen everything's later this year, right? Because we had cooler temperatures. So we're not necessarily going to have exact dates, but no, sometime in late May or June, we might do that ironwood harvest. So that will be, again, a new thing that we're doing, kind of these pop-up workshops, and hoping for them to be mostly neighborhood based and pulling on the knowledge of the neighbors to help engage and teach other neighbors. So come visit us. That is all I have. I think there might be time for questions.
Any questions for?
Yes.
Where do you source your edibles? Trying to find specifically wolfberries.
Yeah, where do we source our native edible plants? There's fantastic nurseries here in Tucson. I think that is one of our treasures here. Spadefoot Nursery was mentioned, Desert Survivors. Charles, what's it? Sonora Flora. Are just three, and I know there are more. I feel like I've been hearing about little micro nurseries popping up here and there. So I would say any one of those, you should be able to find wolfberries. Yes.
So you mentioned the salt in the urine, but isn't the acidity a problem too? I know that like in deer parks and zoos and stuff, besides the compaction of the soils, the other main problem is this acidity from the urine. As far as trying to produce something on that ground.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to take local context into the picture, including what your soil composition is like. And then I think thinking about dilution might be part of it too. Like if you have higher volume, that diluting it with rainwater. I can't speak specifically to acidity. I just know that it's a common practice that's been used for a long time in agriculture across the world, and at least in our site, it's working really well. But that's an interesting question.
Citrus trees and the other thing that we like to.
Yeah, we have very alkaline soils here. So the things similar to citrus trees and things that aren't from here that require a more acidic soil, it kind of gets balanced out in that way. Unless you
Thanks,
have a
Alex.
lot of peat in a little area.
That's a good question. Yes.
How many months does it take for the humanure to go from deposit in the initial container to you can put it on the soil so that it's safe?
Yeah.
4
So
months, 5 months, how long?
here where it never freezes really. I mean, and we have year-round warm temperatures. It's 4 months. And that system I showed you, that was more of a small batch system. We did a pilot program, I think it was about 10 years ago now, specifically testing out that barrel composting toilet system. We had an EPA grant. We had 20 homeowners participate, and we tested the finished humanure after 4 months and all these, and they all came back as grade A biosolids, which means you can use it for anything you want, perfectly safe to use. For larger composting toilet systems, we have several at the Living Lab. We have one that's like a larger, trying to remember what it's called, chamber system. And so that's about a year rotation, and that's partly because it's sized for a lot more users. But yes, you can anywhere, I would say from 4 months to a year, again, depending on temperatures and how much water, air, oxygenation it's getting, but it's pretty fast.
My question is, when you started to introduce human waste into the garden, how did the community react to it, and how did you solve that problem, or how did you get around it?
Great question. And I love talking about composting toilets. I like that you're asking these questions. I could have done my entire presentation on that. So I think what's interesting to me is whether people are into it or not, everyone's interested. So you're always going to capture someone's attention with composting toilets and urine diversion. So you've got a captive audience. I think for us, a big part of why we've also been doing this at our site is because we want to normalize it. The idea of pooping into clean drinking water and flushing it away makes no sense to me, especially in a desert environment. And so these practices have been done traditionally and all across the world. And so to bring this back as a normal activity and for that to be something that that everyone can experience here, we definitely have some people who are like, I don't want to enter that composting toilet. But we have, I think, 4 different types of composting toilets, and we try for all of them to be clean and presentable. And we have one that's kind of fancy. So trying to appeal to different sensibilities and not for it to feel like an outhouse, I think is important for the cultural aspects too.
Do you have any recommendations for people on dealing with like city codes and maybe looking for exemptions?
For composting toilets specifically, or
Yeah, just for any alternative sort of toilets or whatnot.
in Arizona? Yeah, so we specifically have worked on that. Still working on that. In fact, the site-built composting toilets that we did a pilot program around 10 years ago, we got approved as site designs at the state level by ADEQ. So anyone in the state can implement those site-built toilets and get it permitted. Unfortunately, in some places, the city or county is holding up people from doing that. And Tucson has been pretty good until like a year ago. Someone in development services decided they didn't think it was a good idea. And now they're holding up permitting. And so it is interesting how you can have something proven and move through at the state level, and then like city or counties can slow it up. And I think that we've seen stuff like that for water harvesting and gray water as well. Not so much in Arizona, but I know that that's an issue that comes up in other states.